The morning sun cast long shadows through the towering glass doors of the Grand Plaza Hotel, its golden rays dancing off the polished marble floors. The bustling lobby was already coming to life with the usual mix of business travelers and tourists, their quiet conversations echoing off the high ceilings adorned with crystal chandeliers. Among the morning crowd, a young girl stepped through the revolving doors, her shoulders back and head held high. She was 16, wearing a carefully chosen navy blue blazer and carrying a leather portfolio filled with papers for the Youth Leadership Conference. She'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, practicing her presentation on community engagement late into the night, making sure every word was perfect. The lobby's grandeur took her breath away. She'd seen fancy hotels before, but the Grand Plaza was something else entirely. The marble fountain in the center sent gentle ripples of water cascading down its sides, creating a soothing backdrop to the morning hustle. Fresh flowers adorned every corner, their sweet scent mixing with the aroma of coffee from the nearby cafe. Looking at her watch, a graduation gift from her grandmother, she realized she was almost an hour early for the conference registration. Her father had always taught her that being early showed respect and preparation. Better 3 hours too soon than a minute too late, he'd quote Shakespeare with a grin. The memory made her smile as she adjusted the strap of her laptop bag. She spotted some comfortable-looking armchairs near one of the grand windows, a perfect spot to review her presentation notes one last time. The sun warmed her face as she settled into the plush leather chair, pulling out her carefully organized folder. Other conference attendees were starting to arrive too, some sitting in similar quiet corners of the lobby, others gathering in small groups near the coffee shop. As she reviewed her notes, she couldn't help but feel proud. Her presentation on youth involvement in local government had already won her school's leadership competition, and now she had the chance to share her ideas with students from across the state. Her father's position had taught her the importance of community service, but she'd worked hard to make her own mark, separate from his achievements. The portfolio in her hands contained months of research, statistics about youth voter registration, and innovative ideas for getting young people involved in local politics. She'd even created a mobile app concept that would help teenagers track local issues and connect with their representatives. Her hands trembled slightly as she flipped through the pages, not from nervousness but from excitement. Around her, the hotel staff moved efficiently through their morning routines. A maintenance worker carefully adjusted a painting on the wall, while housekeeping staff pushed their carts toward the elevator banks. The concierge desk was busy helping early morning guests with directions and restaurant recommendations, their professional demeanor adding to the hotel's atmosphere of sophistication. She pulled out her phone to text her father, wanting to share her excitement about finally being here. "Made it to the hotel, Dad. Everything looks amazing. Can't wait for the conference to start." She added a smiling emoji, knowing it would make him laugh. He always teased her about using emojis in their texts, but she knew he secretly loved them. The conference schedule showed an impressive lineup of speakers and workshops. There would be sessions on public speaking, community organizing, and even a panel discussion with successful young entrepreneurs. Her own presentation was scheduled for the afternoon session, giving her plenty of time to settle in and calm her nerves. As more conference attendees filtered into the lobby, she noticed the diversity of the group. There were students from urban schools, rural communities, private academies, and public institutions. Some wore formal business attire, others opted for smart casual wear, but all shared the same eager look of anticipation for the day ahead. She pulled out her water bottle and took a small sip, consciously avoiding any spills on her carefully chosen outfit. The blazer had been a splurge, but as her mother always said, dress for the job you want, not the job you have. Right now, she wanted to be taken seriously as a young leader, and every detail mattered. The morning light continued to fill the lobby, creating an almost magical atmosphere. Through the windows, she could see the city coming to life, business people hurrying to their offices, cafe workers setting up outdoor seating, and early morning joggers taking advantage of the pleasant weather. It felt like the perfect setting for a day that she hoped would mark the beginning of her journey into leadership and public service. Little did she know that this ordinary morning was about to become anything but ordinary, and that her experience would spark a conversation that would reach far beyond the walls of the Grand Plaza Hotel. For now, though, she was simply a dedicated young student, preparing to share her vision for a better community, unaware that she was about to become part of a much bigger story. The peaceful morning atmosphere in the Grand Plaza Hotel's lobby was about to shift dramatically. The front desk manager, a woman in her mid-40s with perfectly styled hair and a crisp black suit, had been watching the young girl in the navy blazer for the past 15 minutes. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she picked up the desk phone, speaking in hushed tones to security. Moments later, a broad-shouldered security guard appeared beside her desk. They exchanged quiet words, their eyes repeatedly darting toward the girl, who remained absorbed in her conference materials, completely unaware of the attention she was drawing. The manager straightened her name tag and smoothed her jacket, a gesture that had become a habit before confrontations. The click of high heels on marble echoed through the lobby as the manager approached, the security guard following close behind. Other hotel guests began to notice, some pausing their conversations to watch the scene unfold. The young girl looked up from her papers, startled by the sudden presence looming over her. "Excuse me," the manager's voice was sharp, cutting through the lobby's ambient noise. "This area is reserved for hotel guests only." She emphasized each word as if speaking to someone who might not understand English, despite the conference materials clearly visible on the girl's lap. The young girl blinked in surprise, quickly gathering her thoughts. "Oh, I'm here for the Youth Leadership Conference," she explained, reaching for her conference registration papers. "Registration starts in about 45 minutes, so I thought I'd review my presentation." "I'm going to have to ask you to leave," the manager interrupted, not even glancing at the documents being offered. "We've had issues with loitering lately, and we take our guests' security very seriously." The security guard shifted his weight, attempting to look more intimidating. Around them, other conference attendees continued to occupy similar spaces in the lobby. A group of teenagers near the coffee shop laughed over their lats. Two boys in blazers discussed their presentations by the fountain. None of them were being approached or questioned. The girl's hands trembled slightly as she pulled out her phone. "There must be a misunderstanding. I can call my father. He's actually... If you don't leave immediately, I'll be forced to call the police." The manager cut in again, her voice rising enough to draw even more attention. The girl's cheeks burned with humiliation as nearby guests turned to stare. Some looked uncomfortable, others quickly averted their eyes, but no one stepped forward to help. The security guard took a step closer. "Come on now, let's not make this difficult." His tone was gentler than the manager's, but the implied threat was clear. The girl's vision blurred with unshed tears as she tried to maintain her composure, remembering her father's words about dignity in the face of injustice. She began packing her materials with shaking hands, carefully placing each document back into her portfolio. The manager stood watching, arms crossed, as if ensuring compliance. The girl's phone buzzed in her pocket, probably her father checking in on her, but she didn't dare answer it now. "This is a mistake," she said quietly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm a registered conference participant. You haven't even checked my credentials." She stood up slowly, clutching her portfolio to her chest like a shield. The manager's response was cold. "We have the right to refuse service to anyone. Security will escort you out." She gestured toward the front doors, making it clear there would be no further discussion. Other conference attendees were starting to arrive in greater numbers now, streaming through the revolving doors with their name tags and folders. They parted around the scene like water around a rock, some whispering to each other, others pretending not to notice the unfolding drama. The young girl took a deep breath, straightened her blazer, and pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved swiftly across the screen as she typed a message to her father. The manager's impatient sigh made it clear she wasn't going to be allowed even this moment of dignity. "I said, you need to leave now," the manager repeated, her voice rising with authority. The security guard moved closer, ready to physically escort her if necessary. The girl looked around the lobby one last time, noting how the beautiful space that had filled her with such awe just moments ago now felt cold and unwelcoming. As she was led toward the exit, she held her head high, though her heart was pounding. Through the glass doors, she could see the city street where she arrived so full of hope just 30 minutes ago. Now she stood on the sidewalk, fighting back tears, waiting for her father to answer her text. What the hotel staff didn't know was that their actions were about to trigger a chain of events that would shake the very foundation of the Grand Plaza's reputation. The young girl they had just humiliated wasn't just any conference attendee, and the next hour would prove to be a harsh lesson in prejudice, power, and consequences. Standing on the sidewalk outside the Grand Plaza Hotel, the young girl felt the morning sun beating down on her face, but it no longer felt warm and welcoming. Her hands clutched her portfolio tightly, knuckles white with tension as she tried to process what had just happened. The beautiful marble entrance that had filled her with such hope just an hour ago now loomed over her like a monument to injustice. Her phone vibrated again, another text from her father. "On my way. Stay right there. Don't let them intimidate you." She took a deep breath, trying to follow his advice, but the tears she'd been holding back started to fall. A group of conference attendees walked past her through the revolving doors, giving her curious glances but quickly looking away when she met their eyes. Through the glass walls of the lobby, she could see the manager and security guard had returned to their posts, acting as if nothing unusual had happened. Other young people continued to arrive for the conference, checking in at the registration desk that was now being set up. The sight of their name badges and welcome packets made her stomach twist. That should have been her in there, preparing for her presentation. An elderly couple exited the hotel, the woman pausing to look at her with concern. "Are you all right, dear?" she asked, noting the tears. The girl quickly wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to maintain her composure. "Yes, thank you," she managed to say, though her voice cracked slightly. The woman seemed unconvinced, but her husband gently guided her along, leaving the girl alone again with her thoughts. The morning traffic rushed by on the street, business people hurrying to work, taxi drivers honking their horns, the city moving forward. While she felt frozen in this moment of humiliation, she checked her watch. The conference would be starting in 20 minutes. All her preparation, all those late nights practicing her presentation, seemed to be slipping away. A few minutes later, one of the conference organizers stepped outside, looking flustered. The girl recognized her from the conference website. She was supposed to be leading the morning session on public speaking. The organizer approached hesitantly, clutching a clipboard. "I heard what happened," she said softly. "This isn't right. We can sort this out." But before she could say more, the hotel manager appeared in the doorway, calling her back inside with a stern look. The organizer gave an apologetic smile and hurried back into the building, leaving the girl feeling even more isolated. She pulled out her presentation notes, now slightly crumpled from being hastily packed away. The paper trembled in her hands as she read the opening lines. "Young voices matter in shaping our community's future." The words felt hollow now, mocking her powerlessness in the face of prejudice. How could she talk about youth empowerment when she'd just been powerless to prevent her own unjust removal from the hotel? More conference attendees streamed past her, some now wearing their official conference lanyards. A few did double takes, recognizing her from the earlier scene in the lobby. She heard whispers. "That's the girl they kicked out, and I can't believe they did that," but no one stopped to help. The weight of their stares made her want to disappear, to run away from this beautiful building that had revealed such an ugly truth. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from her mother. "Dad's almost there. Hold your head high, baby. You've done nothing wrong." The words brought fresh tears to her eyes, but they also helped her straighten her shoulders. She was her father's daughter, after all. He had taught her about moments like these, about the importance of standing up to injustice with dignity. The security guard appeared again at the door, watching her suspiciously as if she might try to sneak back in. She met his gaze steadily this time, refusing to be intimidated despite her racing heart. He shifted uncomfortably and looked away first, perhaps feeling a twinge of conscience about his role in the situation. A local news van drove past slowly, and she wondered if they were heading to cover the conference. The irony wasn't lost on her. A youth leadership conference about empowering young voices, while her own voice had been so thoroughly silenced. She checked her watch again. 10 minutes until the conference started. Her presentation slot would remain empty, her ideas unheard. The morning had turned warmer, and she could feel sweat beginning to dampen her carefully chosen blazer. A street vendor selling coffee nearby kept glancing in her direction, clearly wondering why a well-dressed young woman was standing alone outside the hotel, occasionally wiping tears from her eyes. He seemed to be debating whether to come over and offer help. Just then, she heard the distinctive sound of her father's car, the slight squeak of the brakes that he'd been meaning to fix. Her heart lifted as she saw the familiar vehicle turn the corner. The hotel staff had no idea what was about to happen, but she did. And despite her tears, despite the humiliation she'd endured, she felt a small smile begin to form. Because her father wasn't just coming as a concerned parent, he was coming as someone with the power to turn this moment of discrimination into a catalyst for change. The hotel manager who had been so quick to judge her, so eager to throw her out, was about to learn a valuable lesson about assumptions and consequences. The sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb with precision, its polished surface reflecting the morning sunlight. The driver's door opened and a tall figure emerged, adjusting his suit jacket with practiced ease. The city's mayor stepped onto the sidewalk, his presence immediately commanding attention from passers-by who recognized their civic leader. His daughter rushed to him, the portfolio still clutched tightly to her chest. In that moment, she wasn't thinking about his position or power. He was simply her father, the person who had always taught her to stand up for what was right. He embraced her briefly, his usual warm smile replaced by a look of controlled concern. "Tell me everything," he said quietly, his deep voice steady despite the anger she could sense beneath his calm exterior. As she recounted the events, his expression grew more serious with each detail. He listened intently, occasionally nodding, his years of political experience evident in his measured reaction to the story of discrimination against his own child. Through the glass doors, they could see the hotel staff beginning to notice something was happening outside. The security guard who had escorted her out was speaking rapidly into his radio, his earlier confidence replaced by visible nervousness. The front desk manager had frozen in place, her face paling as she recognized the distinguished figure standing beside the girl she had so callously dismissed. The mayor straightened his tie, a familiar gesture his daughter had seen him make countless times before important meetings. "Let's go inside," he said calmly, placing a protective hand on his daughter's shoulder. "I believe we need to have a conversation about proper guest relations." As they walked through the revolving doors, the atmosphere in the lobby shifted dramatically. The busy morning chaos came to an abrupt halt as people recognized the city's leader. The manager who had been so dismissive earlier now stood rooted behind her desk, her earlier arrogance replaced by growing panic. Conference attendees stopped their conversations mid-sentence, turning to watch the scene unfold. Some had their phones out, recording the moment when their mayor walked in with the young girl who had been unfairly ejected from the premises. The story would likely be all over social media within the hour. The security guard who had helped remove her earlier now stood awkwardly to the side, studying his shoes with intense interest. His radio crackled with concerned voices from other staff members who had spotted the mayor on their security cameras. The morning sun streaming through the windows seemed to spotlight the unfolding scene. "Good morning," the mayor's voice carried across the lobby, professional but with an edge that made several staff members flinch. "I'd like to speak with the general manager immediately." His words were polite, but the authority in his tone made it clear this wasn't a request. The front desk manager fumbled with her phone, her hands shaking as she dialed. Within moments, doors opened and closed throughout the hotel as senior staff members rushed to respond to the situation. The general manager appeared from a side office, adjusting his tie and smoothing his jacket as he hurried across the lobby. His face showed the dawning recognition of just how serious the situation had become. Hotel guests and conference attendees watched in fascination as the power dynamic shifted. The same staff who had been so quick to judge and dismiss a young girl now scrambled to appear professional and accommodating. The contrast wasn't lost on anyone watching, especially the other young conference participants who had witnessed her removal earlier. The mayor's daughter stood tall beside her father, her earlier tears replaced by a quiet dignity. She watched as the hotel's senior staff approached, noting how different their demeanor was now. The morning light caught the mayor's official city pin, making it gleam, a small but powerful symbol of his authority. "Perhaps we should discuss this in my office," the general manager suggested, gesturing toward a hallway. The mayor nodded but turned to his daughter first. "Would you like to join us?" he asked, making it clear that this was her moment too. She wasn't just a victim, but an active participant in addressing the injustice. The conference organizer who had tried to help earlier caught her eye from across the lobby, giving her an encouraging nod. Other conference attendees watched with newfound respect, recognizing that the young presenter they had ignored in her moment of need was the daughter of their city's leader. As they followed the general manager toward his office, the mayor's daughter felt a mix of emotions. There was still hurt from the discrimination she'd faced, but now there was also a sense of purpose. This incident would become more than just a personal humiliation, it would be a catalyst for change. The clicking of their shoes on the marble floor echoed through the now quiet lobby. The same hallway that had felt so unwelcoming earlier now carried them toward a moment of reckoning. The hotel staff who had been so quick to judge based on appearances were about to learn an important lesson about the consequences of prejudice. The general manager's office was a stark contrast to the grand lobby, smaller, more intimate, with dark wood paneling and city views through floor-to-ceiling windows. The mayor's daughter noticed how the manager's hands trembled slightly as he gestured for them to take seats in the leather chairs facing his desk. Before anyone could speak, there was a knock at the door. The front desk manager who had started this whole incident entered, followed by the head of security. Both looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. The general manager motioned for them to sit in the remaining chairs, creating an uncomfortable gathering of those responsible for the morning's events. "Let's review what happened this morning," the mayor began, his voice calm but carrying the weight of authority earned from years of public service. "My daughter arrived early for a youth leadership conference, a conference your hotel is hosting. She was sitting quietly in your lobby, reviewing her presentation materials." He paused, letting the simple facts hang in the air. The front desk manager shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Through the office windows, they could see the conference in full swing now, young people moving between meeting rooms with their badges and folders. The same activity the mayor's daughter should have been part of, if not for the prejudice she'd encountered. Would anyone like to explain why she was singled out? The mayor continued. "Perhaps we could start by reviewing the security footage." It wasn't a suggestion. The general manager quickly turned to his computer, typing with nervous energy as he pulled up the morning's surveillance videos. The footage was crystal clear on the large monitor mounted on the wall. They watched in silence as the scene unfolded, the young girl sitting quietly, other guests ignored by staff, the confrontational approach, the humiliating escort out. The evidence of discrimination was undeniable. We had concerns about loitering," the front desk manager attempted to explain, her voice weak. The mayor held up his hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "Let's be honest here," he said, leaning forward slightly. "My daughter was the only person approached, the only person threatened with police action, the only person removed from the premises. Why?" His question hung in the air like a heavy weight. The general manager wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. "Sir, I want to assure you this isn't how we train our staff. This is completely unacceptable behavior and doesn't reflect our values as an organization." "Values are reflected in actions, not words," the mayor responded. His daughter sat straighter in her chair, drawing strength from her father's composed confrontation of the injustice. "What I see here is a clear case of profiling, and I'm certain this isn't the first time it's happened." The security guard, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "I was just following orders, but I should have asked more questions. Should have checked her credentials. I'm sorry." His admission seemed to crack the defensive wall the others had built. The mayor's daughter finally spoke, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "I had my conference registration right there. I tried to show it to you, but you didn't even want to look at it. You'd already decided who I was and what I was doing there." The front desk manager's face flushed with shame. The security footage continued to play silently in the background, a constant reminder of their actions. Through the windows, they could see news vans beginning to arrive outside. Word was spreading about the incident. "Here's what's going to happen," the mayor said, his tone shifting from confrontational to constructive. "First, we need immediate action. My daughter should be allowed to give her presentation. She's worked too hard to have this opportunity taken away by prejudice." The general manager nodded quickly, reaching for his phone to make arrangements. The mayor continued, "But this isn't just about today. This is about systemic change. I want to see your staff training programs, your hiring practices, your guest relation protocols. Everything." His daughter watched as the hotel staff began taking notes, their earlier arrogance replaced by genuine attention. This was why she admired her father. He could turn moments of conflict into opportunities for positive change. "We'll also need a public statement," the mayor added, "not just an apology, but a commitment to concrete changes." The young people attending this leadership conference deserve to see how real change happens, how we can transform negative incidents into stepping stones for progress. The general manager was nodding continuously now, relief showing on his face as he realized this wouldn't be just a PR nightmare, it could be a turning point for his hotel. The front desk manager had tears in her eyes, whether from shame or realization was hard to tell. Through the office windows, they could see the conference attendees in the hallway, some pointing toward the office, others checking their phones as news of the incident spread. The mayor's daughter realized this had become bigger than her personal experience. It was becoming a moment of education for everyone involved. The morning sun had risen higher now, casting different shadows through the windows, marking the passage of time since her arrival at the hotel. In just a few hours, what had started as a personal humiliation was transforming into a powerful lesson about accountability, leadership, and the possibility of positive change. The afternoon sun streamed through the hotel's conference room windows as the mayor addressed a hastily assembled group of hotel staff, conference organizers, and local media. The large room was packed, with some people standing along the walls, all eyes focused on the podium where the city's leader stood beside his daughter. The tension from the morning had transformed into something different, an energy of anticipation and possibility. Hotel employees who had been whispering nervously among themselves fell silent as the mayor began to speak, his voice carrying the warmth and authority that had made him such a respected leader. "What happened this morning was unacceptable," he began, "but our response to it will define us more than the incident itself." He gestured to the hotel's general manager, who stood nearby looking both chastened and determined. The hotel's management has agreed to implement immediate changes in their training and operational procedures. The front desk manager who had caused the morning's trouble sat in the front row, her earlier arrogance replaced by genuine attention. She had spent the last hour in tears after watching the security footage of her own behavior, seeing herself through others' eyes for the first time. "Starting tomorrow," the general manager announced, stepping forward, "we're launching a comprehensive training program for all staff members. This isn't just about avoiding discrimination, it's about creating a truly welcoming environment for every guest who walks through our doors." His voice carried the conviction of someone who had learned a difficult but valuable lesson. The mayor's daughter watched from her seat on the stage, noting how different everything felt from the morning's humiliation. The same lobby that had been the scene of her removal was now filling with conference attendees returning from their lunch break, many giving her supportive smiles as they passed. The head of security stepped up next, clearing his throat nervously before speaking. "We're revising all our protocols," he announced. "No guest will ever be approached without proper cause, and all security staff will undergo additional training in respectful guest interactions." His words were simple but sincere, reflecting hours of serious discussion about changing the hotel's culture. Reporters scribbled in notebooks and raised their hands with questions, but the mayor held up his hand. "Before we take questions, I'd like my daughter to speak." He stepped back from the podium, giving her an encouraging nod. The room fell silent as she rose from her chair, smoothing her blazer, the same one she'd worn during the morning's incident. Walking to the podium, she felt different from the girl who had stood crying on the sidewalk just hours ago. Her prepared conference presentation lay forgotten in her portfolio. Instead, she spoke from the heart about her experience and her hopes for change. "What happened to me this morning isn't unique," she began, her voice growing stronger with each word. "But how we respond to it can be. We can choose to let incidents like this divide us, or we can use them as opportunities to learn and grow together." The room was completely silent, every person hanging on her words. The front desk manager wiped tears from her eyes as she listened. During the break, she had approached the mayor's daughter privately, offering a heartfelt apology and sharing her own story of realizing her unconscious biases. It had been a difficult conversation, but an important one. "The Youth Leadership Conference I came here to attend is about empowering young voices," she continued. "What better way to demonstrate leadership than by showing how we can transform negative experiences into positive change?" Several conference attendees in the audience nodded in agreement. The hotel staff listened intently as she outlined specific suggestions for improvement, ideas she had originally prepared for her conference presentation, now taking on new meaning in light of the morning's events. Her father watched proudly as she turned a moment of discrimination into a lesson in leadership. Local business owners who had heard about the incident began arriving, asking how they could implement similar training in their establishments. What had started as one hotel's mistake was becoming a catalyst for citywide change. The afternoon light shifted through the windows as the meeting continued, casting long shadows across the conference room floor. But unlike the morning's harsh revelations, these shadows seemed to highlight the progress being made, the connections being formed, the understanding being reached. As the meeting concluded, the mayor's daughter noticed the street vendor from the morning, the one who had watched her crying outside, setting up a coffee station in the lobby. The hotel had invited local small business owners to cater the afternoon sessions, turning their response to the incident into action that benefited the whole community. "This isn't the end," the mayor concluded, returning to the podium. "It's just the beginning of real change." His words carried the weight of promise, not just policy. The room erupted in applause, not the polite kind that follows most speeches, but the genuine appreciation for a moment of transformation. 3 months had passed since that fateful morning at the Grand Plaza Hotel. The building's gleaming exterior looked the same, but inside, everything had changed. The morning sun once again streamed through the lobby's tall windows, but this time it illuminated a very different scene. The mayor's daughter stood at the same podium where she had spoken that day, but now she was addressing a packed room of hotel staff, business owners, and community leaders. Behind her, a large banner read, "Community Leadership Excellence Awards." The same conference room that had hosted her first impromptu speech about change now served as a gathering place for celebrating progress. "When I walked into this hotel 3 months ago," she began, her voice confident and clear, "I never imagined that moment of discrimination would lead to this." The front desk manager, sitting in the audience, nodded slightly. She had become one of the most passionate advocates for change, using her own experience to teach others about unconscious bias. The hotel had transformed its training programs completely. New employees now went through an intensive 2-week course on inclusive customer service. The security team had been retrained with a focus on respectful engagement. But most importantly, the hotel had become a model for other businesses in the city. In the past 90 days, the general manager reported, standing at the podium, "We've hosted training sessions for over 50 local businesses." Our incident became a wake-up call for the entire hospitality industry in our city. He gestured to the wall where photos showed various community engagement events that had taken place since that day. The mayor sat in the front row, watching his daughter with pride as she continued her presentation. She had turned her original conference speech about youth leadership into a real-world program now implemented in schools across the city. Young people were learning how to recognize and respond to discrimination, how to be advocates for positive change. The coffee vendor who had witnessed her crying on the sidewalk that morning was now a regular fixture in the hotel lobby, his small business thriving thanks to the hotel's new commitment to supporting local entrepreneurs. He smiled and waved as he served his signature brew to conference attendees. But the real change, the mayor's daughter continued, isn't in the policies or programs. It's in the hearts and minds of people. She gestured to the audience, where hotel staff old and new sat together. It's in how we choose to respond when we witness injustice. It's in the courage to admit mistakes and the commitment to do better. The head of security stood up to share his perspective. His team now included members from diverse backgrounds, and they had developed new protocols that emphasized communication and respect. "We learned that security isn't just about protecting property," he explained. "It's about making everyone feel safe and welcome." Local news crews filmed as various speakers shared their experiences of transformation. The story had gone viral 3 months ago, but not for the reason anyone expected. Instead of focusing on the discrimination, media coverage highlighted the positive changes that followed, a rare story of how a community turned a negative incident into an opportunity for growth. The front desk manager, who had once been the face of discrimination, now led sensitivity training sessions. Her personal journey from prejudice to awareness had become a powerful teaching tool. "I was wrong," she said simply when it was her turn to speak. but being wrong taught me how to be better. Young conference attendees from that day had spread the story to their own communities. Some had started similar programs in their schools, turning the incident into a template for positive change. The mayor's daughter had been invited to speak at youth leadership events across the state, sharing her experience and the lessons learned. The hotel's booking rates had actually increased since the incident, with many guests specifically choosing the Grand Plaza because of its commitment to inclusive service. The general manager noted that what could have been a business disaster had become a model for corporate responsibility. As the ceremony concluded, the mayor's daughter looked around the room, remembering how different it had felt that first morning. The same crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, but now they illuminated faces full of purpose and understanding rather than prejudice and assumption. 3 months ago, I stood in this lobby feeling powerless, she concluded. Today, I stand here feeling hopeful. Not because we've solved every problem, but because we've shown what's possible when we face our mistakes honestly and commit to real change. The applause that followed wasn't just for her words, it was for everyone in the room who had played a part in the transformation. As people mingled afterward, sharing stories and ideas, it was clear that what had started as one girl's humiliation had grown into a movement for positive change that would continue to ripple through the community for years to come. Outside, the city streets bustled with life, unaware that inside this building, a small revolution in human understanding had taken place. The morning sun caught the hotel's windows, making them shine like beacons of hope, a fitting symbol for a place that had transformed from a site of discrimination into a center for positive change.